I now call to order the Committee on House Administration for purposes of today's hearing examining the future of the Library of Congress. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to be included. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. First, I would like to thank our witness for taking time out of her very busy schedule to be with us today. In 1896, the Joint Committee on the Library held a series of hearings to discuss the future direction of the Library of Congress. Historically housed in the U.S. Capitol, the library's new Jefferson building was nearing completion, and members desired to learn what the librarian at the time, Mr. Ainsworth Rand Spofford, envisioned for the library. Dr. Hayden, you have been at the library for a year now. It's hard to believe that it's gone by this fast. It is only appropriate that we now discuss with you your vision for the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress's current strategic plan, entitled FY 2016 through FY 20, Serving the Congress and the Nation, was drafted as you were coming on board. There is some concern that this document is a placeholder, as there is an initiative underway under your leadership in which the library is identifying and implementing a new set of priorities. It is our understanding the library's resources will be aligned around these new priorities. So it is a bit unclear what role these priorities will play in respect to the current strategic plan and whether it will replace, supplement, or simply add to the current plan. If these new priorities are intended to lead you in the library, the committee will want to ensure that benchmarks and measurements are now in place to measure that progress. As librarian, you have been charged with a great task. The Library of Congress serves as the largest library in the world, maintaining more than 164 million items in its collection. It houses a copyright office, which registered more than 414 copyright claims in fiscal year 2016. The library is also home to the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, which, according to the library, in fiscal year 2016 provided an amazing 22 million copies of Braille and recorded books and magazines to more than 800,000 individuals. These are just a few of the library's vital roles and the constituencies that you and the library serve. We all appreciate the historic accomplishments and the mission of the Library of Congress and seek its very best as a steward of the hard-earned taxpayer dollars as it serves Congress and the American people in the decades to come. Dr. Hayden, I want to thank you for returning to us today. I know you testified briefly before this committee in February and again last month on the library's IT challenges. I believe the library is at a critical juncture, and we must ensure that the library remains true to its core mission while recognizing the demands of the 21st century. It's a difficult balance, but I'm confident that you are up to the challenge and that this can be done. And I look forward to hearing from you on these efforts. I'd now like to recognize my colleague and the ranking member of this committee, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of providing an opening statement. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank Chairman Harper for calling this hearing today and thank Dr. Hayden for appearing before us. Dr. Hayden has made great strides in improving library operations in her short tenure as the Librarian of Congress. From her progress in improving library-wide technology infrastructure and the ongoing modernization of the Copyright Office, the library is a better place today than it was a year ago, and we have Dr. Hayden to thank for that. Today, I look forward to hearing from Dr. Hayden about how the library plans to continue improving its operations and its service to Congress through the strategic planning process. One of the library's core missions, fostering relationships with local libraries, is near and dear to my heart. The Free Library of Philadelphia system enjoys a close and productive relationship with the Library of Congress, and I hope that we can arrange our visit to the Darby Public Library, which is the oldest library in the nation, for some point in the fall. I will have a longer statement for the record, but for now I look forward to Dr. Hayden's testimony in assisting the Library of Congress on any way I can to ensure the nation's treasures can serve generations from year to come. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any other member wish to be recognized for the purposes of an opening statement? Seeing none, I'll now introduce our witness. No stranger to this committee and always welcome and enjoy having you back. Dr. Carla Hayden was sworn in as the 14th Librarian of Congress on September 14th, 2016. Her appointment to this position also marked the first time our nation's library has been led by a woman and an African American. Dr. Hayden is a librarian's librarian, dedicating her entire career to pursuing the accessibility of libraries in communities. In her brief time leading the library, Dr. Hayden has demonstrated her commitment to continuing the tradition of collecting, preserving, and making available a vast collection of educational resources and protecting these collections for future generations. It's no easy task, but we greatly appreciate your initiatives and your service, and we look forward to hearing from you today. And the committee welcomes you, Dr. Hayden, and we now recognize you for the purposes of an opening statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee. And thank you for inviting me to provide testimony on strategic planning at the Library of Congress. I first want to thank this committee for its continued support and the interest you've shown in your library. Congress created this agency 217 years ago, providing in one place an enduring legacy of knowledge and cultural heritage for members of Congress and the American people. And I am proud to continue that legacy today as librarian. Nearly 1 year into my tenure, I continue to be inspired by the institution and the commitment of its staff. It is a dynamic time for the Library of Congress, and we are poised for modernization and innovation. I have laid out a vision to expand access to our many resources so that treasures and services are more readily available online for users who cannot visit Washington, D.C. Everyone, we hope, will have a sense of ownership and pride in this national treasure. As I testified earlier this year, we are moving forward to develop a comprehensive digital strategy as we rethink the use of technology to fulfill our mission. The digital strategy will support and be informed by library-wide strategic planning. Achieving this vision means strengthening fundamentals, the most important of which is strategic planning. My approach is informed by my many years of professional experience leading results-oriented institutions as an executive, a board member, and even as an instructor in graduate library school programs. The library's current strategic plan, drafted in October 2015, echoes previous plans in defining a 5-year framework for our operations. Unlike its predecessors, though, the plan was created to be a living document, serving as a valuable baseline for additional strategic planning. And I am happy to share that new work is underway. While the central tenets of our service mission do not and will not change, our approach must change over time. The library requires a strategic plan that is dynamic, forward-looking, and reinforced with measurable outcomes. It must also increase coordination across the library's service units while still supporting mission-specific goals of each unit. Ultimately, the new strategic plan will be completed at the end of FY 2018, and the new plan will put forward the vision for the library's future and set a structure needed to achieve that future. And this is a top priority. As such, I have elevated the library's strategic planning office in our organizational structure. The director of that office, Diane Houghton, now reports directly to me. In charting a path for long-term future success, we're examining improvements more broadly in our planning processes. For example, we are strengthening our approach to internal controls and risk management to anticipate and hopefully head off coming challenges. And in addition, the library has made good progress to improve performance management with the launch of a system in late 2016 to track accomplishments mapped to the current strategic plan. And we are now in the first stages of a new strategic planning initiative to determine the library's vision and priorities going forward, and then to redevelop the strategic plan as a roadmap. We call this work Envisioning 2025. The library is moving rapidly to complete the envisioning work, and we're exploring trends in our environment and gathering internal and external input among other components. I look forward to sharing this work with you and your staff and sharing what we're learning. And I seek your guidance in determining our direction. The feedback we receive from Congress will be a central part of our progress and will help ensure that we are responsive to your priorities. In closing, the library is well on the way to providing a roadmap for the future, and I thank you for providing me the opportunity to testify on this important topic, strategic planning, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden, and I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes for the purposes of asking you some questions on this. What is the, and I'm trying to, obviously figure out the strategic plan that was for FY16 through 2020, and now your plan envisioning 2025. How do those work together? Explain that to me a little better.
The library's current strategic plan for 2016 to 2020 outlines and reinforces the library's commitment to its core mission to serve Congress and the American people. And it included 7 strategies that are really directed to giving guidance to the action plans that the library has been working with and we're measuring right now. For instance, using technology as a tool, enhancing the skills of our staff members. And what the work that's being done now will help us do is to re-envision and revamp some of those basic strategies with some information that we are gathering, including more input from Congress and looking at the latest techniques as well in strategic planning.
Do you consider these 2 documents in any way to be in conflict with one another?
Oh, no.
Or supplement each other?
They actually, and what I think, and I have to tell you that I'm just going to say right now that I'm so pleased that you're interested in strategic planning. In my professional experience, I know that that's not always the most exciting topic, sure. But it is a vital operational management tool. And so the library has had a history of strategic planning since the 1970s in earnest. And so this plan is going to be a continuation of that tradition of trying to look at what are the issues of the day and even thinking about what the issues might be in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years that will allow us to be considered as we try to take this institution that was established in 1800 into more current times.
If I may ask, Dr. Hayden, the 2016 to 2020 strategic plan and the envisioning 2025 plan, are these available to be viewed on the website?
Yes, they're available, and we have print copies, and we are very pleased that they are providing, I think, a way for everyone to at least talk about what is the future of the Library of Congress.
Did the envisioning 2025, did that all begin under your leadership since you arrived in September?
Well, I mentioned also the library's new strategic planning officer who is right here. And she, I had already, was very pleased in taking the position actually to know that there had been an emphasis on strategic planning, and Ms. Houghton had been hired. And so that's when I said, my goodness, we have a structure possibly in place to really make strategic planning dynamic. That's why I made the office report directly to the librarian, and so we will be making sure that that is a priority.
All right, just so that I'm clear then, that you see, I was going to say you envision, anyway, you see the
We've got
Envision
you.
2025 being coordinated with, not replacing, the strategic plan.
And it can't, it replaces it in terms of operations.
Okay.
Let's say.
Explain that.
Each strategic plan has a number of action items that will give a framework to achieving certain goals. And the goals are basically the same: to be more effective, to strengthen staff. Those basic goals never change. They're tied to a mission. The action plans, and so I'm just,
Sure,
sorry.
no, please, go ahead, Dr.
The action plans that will form the new strategic plan are going to be the things like make sure in fiscal year 2020 that all of, and this is the ultimate goal of any strategic plan, all of our fiscal appropriation requests are tied and measurable to achieving the goals, those types of things, so that by 2020, those two things, the fiscal and the actions will meld. Okay. That you're not doing anything that isn't tied to your ultimate goal of serving Congress and the people.
And we look forward to working with you on both of those items, and also in looking at measurable benchmarks so we can work together on that. And with that, I will recognize the ranking member, Mr. Brady, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hayden, the Congressional Research Service is one of the service unit which sole customers is the Library of Congress. How will the revised strategic plan impact CRS service to Congress?
The CRS mission to serve Congress in the most efficient and effective way is really an embedded part of the library's general plan, and the CRS unit has its own strategic direction and plan to be very specific about how it will achieve that. For instance, making sure that the latest technology is employed to serve Congress better, to look at staffing patterns. So the CRS strategic plan and action steps will be and continue to be directed toward their specific mission.
Thank you. And the Veterans History Project has been an incredibly successful and popular program. How will the revised plan build on the success and enhance the project?
I'm very excited about the progress of the Veterans History Project. In fact, we have moved and are planning to move the office to the Jefferson Building for more visibility, and we have started to implement the Gold Star Families recommendations, and our director of the Veterans History Project, Dr. Lloyd, is the first female medic in the Army, and she has been making presentations to all types of veterans groups, and we are road testing a mobile app that will make it easier for veterans to give their oral histories. We would like to also expand the program to each state, and we would seek Congress's help on that, because we feel that reaching out and using local libraries and other institutions to be recording studios, basically, will help us get even more oral histories. We have over 120,000 now oral histories from veterans.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you for the job that you're doing in serving the United States people in the library, people that come see you, the students, and naturally, again, the veterans. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Walker, for 5 minutes for purpose of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hayden, thanks for being with us today. Always a pleasure to see you. The library serves many diverse constituent communities, including visiting the public, the copyright community, and others. how are you gathering proper customer data in order to better access user needs, customer accessibility, and satisfaction? Can you speak to that?
Oh, and thank you for asking that, because a vital part of any strategic planning effort is to gather data and information. So the library has several mechanisms in terms of customer, basically, satisfaction, starting with the mission-specific units. CRS just recently participated in a Gallup survey of Congress and staff members, and that was very helpful, and we'll be updating that with this strategic planning effort, as well as visitor surveys. We ask people when they come into the different facilities. We also survey researchers, and when we're going to do more online, that people can, you've probably seen at airports, for instance, where you exit a flight and they ask you and rate. So we're looking at all types of non-obtrusive and voluntary ways that we can also get input.
Great. There's a little button as you come out of the Dunkin' Donuts in the Longworth building. You can just hit the green button as you go out. Maybe something like that. I'm just teasing with you a little bit.
Well, there are a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very helpful, though.
Historically, the library has ascertained most of its collections from its copyright authority and role. I'm sure you're
Yes.
aware of that. There are proposals, though, being discussed to move the copyright office out of the library entirely. If that were to happen, can you tell me how would the library maintain its historic collections and acquisitions?
The historic collection that has actually made the Library of Congress the largest in the world is based on the 1870 law that required people who are registering for copyright of any type to deposit 2 copies, physical copies of those materials. And that has enabled the library to grow and provide materials that would have been fiscally impossible, and it was designed to do that. And so the opportunity to continue the deposit requirement would be vital to continuing that wherever the Copyright Office would reside.
Okay.
The deposit requirement is what's essential.
Sure. And I can't see the timer from here, but I'm assuming I maybe have time for another question as far as specifically the cost of this transition, as far as moving that. Have you any research or have any idea on the cost of that?
I have not been involved in any of that research. I'm sure that would be part of a consideration.
All right. Last question here is, in the process of searching out for hiring a new registrar of copyrights, do you have any update on how we're doing there?
Yes, the search has paused, waiting for the direction from Congress.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I will yield back to the chairman this time. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Hayden, for being here. Appreciate your service. Let's talk about congress.gov briefly. How would you say you're satisfied overall with congress.gov?
Congress.gov and any technology-based service could always improve. And part of our information technology plan is to make sure that any type of electronic service that we give is secure. That's the #1 priority, and also very responsive. And so we will be continuing to make progress on updating and securing these systems.
Okay, so congress.gov 3.5 was recently released. Do you anticipate more releases in the future, or can you speak to that?
I would anticipate updates and improvements in the technology system. I can't give a definite timeline or point 4 yet.
Okay. How would you say you measure customer satisfaction from congressional clients with congress.gov?
The Congressional Research Service has a very, and this is the technical term, robust way of determining customer satisfaction, and their customers are, of course, members and staff. And so there are, from what I understand, online ways to give input, as well as looking at usage and usage patterns.
Okay. Shifting gears just a bit and discussing historic legislative data of Congress, where would you say you are in making this data accessible? I know there are entire decades, over a century, in fact, of the congressional record not accessible by the public. Do you foresee this changing?
Hopefully, yes. And we also are facing the same challenge with the historical records for copyright. 32 million scanned cards that need to be put into a searchable database. And so when you look at the challenges in the world's largest library with these special units, Congressional Research Service, copyright operation, the challenges of technology are great, but we are very pleased that the Chief Information Officer, Mr. Barton, has been tackling all of those issues and working with the specific units to address their technology needs as well. He is now the full support of the units.
Okay, thank you. Now, in terms of public programming, how does the library decide which programming to proceed with or which not to pursue? Do you have a specific method or process for that?
We just established a centralized programming review committee. Traditionally, the library, every unit was doing specific programming to its unit. Let's say the Middle Eastern Division, or in terms of library services, different service units were doing it. So we're looking at how we coordinate the programming and also have a review process to avoid duplication and to really make sure that the programming fits the mission of the library. And there you will see, I can say that this confidently, more programming for the educational community, K through 12, working with teachers, and doing more live streaming out to districts as well. We have started that with the author programs, and so we are having, for instance, when a popular author is here in Washington, D.C., we make arrangements to have live streaming to school libraries and public libraries throughout the country. So that will, we hope, give us a broader audience and more awareness of the programming.
Do you give specific guidance to curators in terms of the programming?
The curators, and I mentioned in my opening statement that I continue to be inspired by the staff of the library. The curators and the researchers and the librarians of the Library of Congress are literally experts in their field. So if they say that there is an author on 18th century French literature and how it influenced this, and we all tend to take their word for it. And they are very in tune with the researchers or people who might be interested in whatever their subject is. And so that's where a lot of the programming comes from, those curators. They know their audiences, and they really do connect with people who are interested in their topics.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Loudermilk, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Harper, and Dr. Hayden. I appreciate you being here. As you know, I'm a frequent user of the library. And I'd like to follow up with some of the questions that Mr. Smith had. I can imagine that your curators and staff have a broad range of suggestions for different programs, displays, et cetera. Specifically on like cinematic presentations that you do at the library or at the Culpeper facility.
Wonderful.
Do you have a set of standards that you apply to decide what is appropriate and what is not appropriate?
The basic standard is to connect the programming with the library's collections.
Okay.
That's number one. So for instance, there's a summer film series that the library is producing. All of the films have been films that were selected to be added to the National Registry of Films.
Something like the disco.
That was
Type
part
thing
of
you were doing
another,
recently.
and
Okay.
in fact, tomorrow, the new poet laureate for the Library of Congress will be on television talking about that program, so you'll be hearing more about poetry. And the discotheque came out of the selection that the library does every year as well of sound recordings.
Okay.
And the person who, what her song was selected, Miss Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive, actually saw a great increase in interest in that particular song and her career, and offered to do something for the library. And what we did was to tie her offer of a free concert, she's quite popular, with what is in our collection as well that relates to that, related films, related fashion, and different things that are in the collection, so.
But when it comes to specific, like the concert or like any production, I'm sure that there's a broad range of suggestions of what you can show or what would be available to the public. Is there a specific set of criteria that you go by to determine what
Yes.
may be appropriate and what isn't appropriate
Yes.
for the Library of Congress to put its stamp on, let's say?
Yes, and the number one issue that you look at in determining, because with the variety of subjects that the library covers, you could program every day, all day.
Right.
We could be a 24/7 programming machine with everything that we cover, from prints and photographs to just you name it, the library, baseball, football, dance, theater, history, everything. So looking at, one, does the program suggestion relate to the collection? Second criteria would be, is it relating to anything going on in the world? You know, is there Women's History Month? You would bring out all of our suffrage materials, which we have a lot of. Black History Month,
Right.
we really have a lot on that. Asian American History Month. So are there things that you look at? But mainly the main thing that we look at is how can we tie in any program to increasing public awareness about the collections that we have.
So you really don't have something that you look at and say, well, you know, this may tie in, but it really wouldn't be appropriate
We
to,
did,
to display.
when I mentioned that programming committee, we're really looking at having a group that represents just about every section of the library, really being that deliberative body as well, and not just leaving it to each.
Do you ever have difficult choices that you have to make of whether to do a presentation or not? And if you do you ever consider running that by the oversight committees?
Oh, sure. That would be, in fact, with the strategic planning effort that we're doing now, one of the aspects in terms of, and this is an ongoing strategy to serve Congress better and to make sure that we do that with our central mission, is how to get even more input as we think about programming, as we think about other services, to get more input from Congress. And so I would welcome, and we're actually going to be making a formal request to find a way to make sure that Congress is involved as well.
Okay, and I thank you, and I do have numerous more questions, Mr. Chair, but I'll submit those for the record because I realize my time has expired, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I'll now recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for walking in late, but I couldn't miss Dr. Hayden. And it's always great to see you. I want to say thank you again for your assistance with our Springfield, Illinois project that we've been talking about, and look forward to seeing you out there in the upcoming months. I know I'm going to be able to read some of the testimony that you've given already and some of the answers to the questions in the record, but I did want to ask something about the strategic plan, the 2016 to 2020 strategic plan. It seems to me to be a little bit short on some measurable benchmarks and, accountability standards in terms of where, in measurable terms that you see the library is going to be at the end of this strategic plan. Will the Envision 2025 initiative include benchmarks, Dr. Hayden?
Oh, yes, quite a few. And in fact, we've established staff teams, we're calling them tiger teams, for all the different areas of possible interest. And one major factor is, yes, it would be good to do so-and-so, but how are we going to measure it? And who's going to be responsible? Sometimes, and I'm sure you've probably had this experience with strategic plans, they can seem very wonderful. We're going to save the world. Okay, how? And who's going to be responsible for it? And that's a major part that we're putting in the fundamentals now for measurement, tracking, and reporting as well, that there will be reporting and people will have to say, here's how it is. But first determining how you're going to tell if you're successful. And also, how are you going to course correct if something is in the yellow zone and to make it a continuous process.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you making the additions of those measurable benchmarks. And as you create these tiger teams, as you create some goals and measurable opportunities for your team over at the LOC, how do you intend to shift resources from one program to another when you identify that maybe we ought to spend a little more over here? So how do you intend to do that, and what can we as a committee expect?
What we hope, and this is the ultimate goal, is that the strategic plans and the actions and what you think you're doing will align with your fiscal appropriations. And you have to, and we're working on that, getting the measurables, getting the management, getting that, and then really making sure that we're combining that with whatever appropriation that we request. And that, I think that will be a great day when that is totally achieved. All too often, strategic plans are over here and your fiscal appropriations are over here, and they're not tied together. And that's what we're working toward.
I appreciate that symbiotic relationship. Sometimes we have that problem in Congress too, where we have our authorizations here and our appropriations there. So hopefully we can work out our issues with our strategic plans, and when it comes to those two issues too. Since I came here late, I don't want to be redundant, so I'm going to yield the rest of my time back, but thank you again, Dr.
Thank
Hayden.
you.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Hayden, by the way, you did an exceptional job on the Fox News Power Player of the Week Sunday. That was very well done. Congratulations. Also, I wanted to state that I'm looking forward very much to your visit to Mississippi in August to participate in the Mississippi Book Festival, and I'll have the privilege of interviewing you live on C-SPAN during your trip there. We're going to have a great time. We'll bring popcorn, maybe not, but we'll have a great visit, and I think you'll enjoy the hospitality that you'll receive. We look forward to having you back for that. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witness, which we will forward and ask the witness to respond to as quickly as she can, so that her answers may be made a part of this record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.